And now we bring in Swedish hockey expert Will Strickland. Will?
Hey, welcome.
My real name is Lars. Let's not get out of control.
You know what, Lars Strickland, I don't mind.
You know,
I think
That's
works.
okay.
there are
4
times-
letters.
Yeah. and I have an affinity for IKEA. So
Hey, welcome.
that
aboard.
being said,
Oh,
you know,
do you eat there? Do you eat at IKEA?
hell no. When
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
younger, though,
I've eaten there.
Wait, but
What's
when I was
wrong
younger,
with it?
because
What's
it
one
was
of the
cheap.
99-cent
Right,
breakfast?
99-cent hot dogs, and you get like tater tots or
You're
whatever.
not sure what's in them.
But they actually named the tater tots after me and my child.
Tater tots.
Well, they actually named it after my son.
I didn't know that.
They call them the strict tater tots.
Okay. Okay.
It just worked out. But
So, okay.
the hockey thing,
Yeah.
you know, the whatever this face condom is this guy's wearing,
Yeah.
that's one thing. But I was so appalled to see the 47th president of the United States
Uh-oh. Here we go.
being allowed to play an NHL All-Star game. Kid Rock,
Kid Rock.
the 47th president of the United
Yeah,
States. You
okay.
didn't know that?
No, I did not.
Not The Rock.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah.
Not Kanye West, but Kid Rock. You laugh, you smirk,
Yeah, well, yeah.
but Donald Trump is in the office, so you
yeah.
never know.
If that can happen.
This is step one.
Yeah,
in the,
if that can happen.
this is step one in the succession plan. They're gonna get that together. Kid Rock's gonna be the president.
no.
The 47th president.
Kid
You
Rock,
think so,
Kid
eh?
Rock at one
No.
point, when you look at Kid Rock's story, he at one point had full, at least from my understanding, full legit kind of street cred in Detroit.
I don't know where. What street?
Well,
Probably in Taylor somewhere.
because
Taylor. They call it Taylor's Tucky for a reason.
I understood that he was okay in some of those like house parties and stuff like that.
I have no idea, but it sounds good. Probably as street credible as the great and immortal Robbie Van Winkle. You know him better.
Yes,
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
Vanilla Ice,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I got an idea for Kid Rock. So during the All-Star Game festivities, maybe they set up the stage in front of the goal during the hardest slap shot competition. Because I'm thinking that would be ideal, and I would watch 2 hours of that if they put 2 hours of it for me.
You know what? I'm with you.
Okay.
Let's make a call to Gary Bettman right now. You have him on speed dial, right?
I do.
Sure,
I
yeah.
do.
So we
yes.
call Gary
Yeah.
and make that a real thing. I
Set
think
it up
that
in front
people
of the
would
net.
tune in.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You might get higher ratings.
Yeah.
I
Gary's
can
gonna
see
pick up guys, it's 10:39. Okay. That's so annoying. Will Strickland, by the way,
welcome
back
aboard.
in.
Strong J.
Happy New
Yeah,
Year.
we,
Thank you, guys.
we-
Thank
Is it
you.
still okay
Oh,
to say
it's
Happy
good.
New Year 15 days into the year or whatever it is?
There is,
we
there,
haven't- we haven't
there
seen-
is, yeah, because we haven't seen each other. That's
No,
one
I know,
thing.
but it's kind of
Yeah.
weird,
But
though,
in
right?
general, when you speak
Yeah.
to people, like I've been sending out emails about my tournament and everything.
Sure.
And at a certain point, I noted that once I got to Dr. King Day on the 15th,
Yeah, that's where the cutoff
that
is.
I'll cut it off. The
Yes.
first 2 weeks of the new year, okay, after that, you're like furniture now. I'm not going to say Happy
Yeah.
New Year to you anymore.
Yeah. Bingo.
Okay, so let's talk. Look, there's a lot to talk about, but your I wouldn't say it's not your hometown of Houston, but Houston is a hometown.
Yeah.
For you to agree. Your son still is there, is he not?
No. He is in the military. So he's
all over
in
the place.
California right now preparing for a secret mission.
Ooh,
So
It's gotta
we'll
do
leave it like
does
that.
it got to do with Kid Rock?
No, but you know, and if I knew, I'm not at liberty to say.
Okay, all right. So the Rockets and the Clippers, and I'm looking at the let's call them shenanigans. Are they shenanigans?
Kerfuffles,
Kerfuffles?
you know, dust ups.
And I'm looking at the whole situation, and I got to tell you, and this goes back to, the whole family of coaches thing. My dad's a coach, I coached, and some of the stuff I see in the court, I can feel my blood pressure going up a little bit for both teams. For both teams. And I get it. And look, the NBA, and you know it better than anybody else. Like it's a man's game. You're not. I mean, this is not. He touched me. It's just it's like rugby, but just not. The ball's rounder. It's really tough. But when I see guys ripping tights off guys, when I see this stuff, and Blake throwing the ball to guys, it starts to get immature, in my opinion. It starts to become non-professional. And then the whole thing, and I understand if Blake intentionally or unintentionally with Mike D'Antoni, but going to the dressing room afterwards, to me, then that is something to me that is, as a professional, it's not professional.
Well, there are levels to this thing, and there are those who like really try to harken back to an earlier time in the NBA where you saw these exciting 78-74 NBA Finals games where it was more wrestling than basketball. And the NBA has done a great job in making their entertainment product more entertaining by cleaning up a lot of that. And a lot of people have an issue with the whole AAUification of the NBA because it's a different time. Kids play together in different teams as they're younger. They come to the NBA together, so they know each other. There shouldn't be a crime in that, but okay, they see a crime in that. The level starting with Doc Rivers and his son, the third best player on an Italian Pro League team right now, Austin Rivers, because he's not an NBA player. But he was kept there because he's Doc Rivers' son. Let's be clear about that. And so the level of nepotism that goes on there irked Chris Paul. And whether people say it or not, probably irks a couple of people on that bench who don't get to play because of Austin Rivers. And so that's one staying point because they were all mad at him. You notice they had a lot of animus toward him.
Yes.
And he's on the bench. Now, guys chirp all the time off the bench.
Sure.
But for some odd reason, it wasn't like he was the only one chirping off the bench. But it was directed at him because of Doc and Chris Paul and their relationship and how Chris Paul wanted out, how he and Blake Griffin had a bad relationship even though it was Lob City and everything else. How the only time that Chris Paul has ever led anyone to anything was that locker room because he couldn't make them to the Western Conference Finals. But, that whole thing started there. These guys are all traded for each other when Houston did the trade for Chris Paul. So there's a lot of back and forth with that. When you say there's a lack of professionalism, I know it's immature, but it's just as immature as fighting on a hockey rink. Sure. Right? But I understand the chippiness, and these guys weren't fighting. Let's be clear on that.
Yeah, that wasn't exactly,
fighting.
Yeah.
It was, you have to understand there's the hold me back protocol in the NBA where Timmy Tough Guy's stances happen all the time, and nobody really swings, outside of Aaron O'Flalo the other night. And it was all happening on MLK Day. I'm like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Are you missing what this whole day is about? Yep. So, again, I like the chippiness. I think he's going to make for great playoffs, and I think that the referees have done a good job. I don't think the league did a good job in sanctioning the two guys from the Houston Rockets because they fined and kicked out Gerald Green and Trevor Ariza for 2 games.
That's correct.
But some of the guys from the Rockets, I thought that James Harden should have gotten in some games. Any of the guys that went to that locker room post-game should have gotten a couple games, right? And the guys.
Is a couple games enough, though?
Yeah.
But
it wasn't a fight. It wasn't a fight. I get that part. I get that part about the locker room.
You throw down a heavy suspension.
Then Chris Paul should have gotten a heavy suspension.
And guess
for that
what?
one.
You don't go to any locker rooms anymore. What the hell is that?
Yeah, but I think 2 games is good for the guys because there was no fighting.
Right.
But the guy who instigated the whole thing, and the Trojan horse, Clint Capella, who went to the front door. He went to the locker room door and knocked on the door. They opened the door. They looked at him. They closed the door.
Back door.
And then he went the back way because Chris Paul knew the entrances.
Okay, but that's just like, look, we're gonna. Can you go and knock first?
That's like my friend over there likes you. Can you come over here and talk to my friend who likes you? Like, it was a bad scene, but you do have a very valid point in that going into the locker room and creating something. I mean, the fact that someone said that the LAPD were called for this thing had Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley in tears and had me in tears as well because the example was, okay, so who called and what did they say?
Yeah.
Chris Paul is coming in our locker room. What? Yeah. Okay, and the problem is what? This menace that is Christopher Emmanuel Paul. What is that?
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Well, I just look at, it's funny, when we get to some of these issues, and this is probably the most, and we talked a little bit about this last time, this volatile time in current society, and you look at the President of the United States and some of the things that he says, like, it was funny when he was The Apprentice. Like, if he said weird stuff in The Apprentice, why watch the show?
Somebody watched the show?
Yeah.
I missed that.
I watched the show. But this isn't supposed to be a show. And some of the stuff that's being said, I can't help but think that what is the next step, for American citizens looking at it? Like, this is going to end soon, right? I mean, this is...
One would hope, but, I mean, there's an investigation going on, and that he's openly saying this as the president. It's not really all that presidential, obviously, but it's encouraged other people to feel that way. You see a lot more of this kind of stuff online now that, closet racists are feeling a little more empowered by it. And I mean, he definitely sets the tone for what the country looks like.
Like, are you shocked by anything he says? So when he says
No.
an African country is a shithole, and you're sitting there, does it impact you at all, or do you sit there and go, well, of course he said that, because I know that's how he feels.
Well, that's when you kind of know what's coming. Like,
Sure.
And if you put a mic in front of this guy and you empower him in a way that, allows him to spit this thing, this vitriol, and it was alleged he said this. Alleged he said it.
Yeah.
And then the very next day, he has a big press conference with all these black people around him. Like, the optics were hilarious. And so I understand it. Like, that's the game that's being played right now in America. And there's this great movie. I think the BBC did it. It's a kind of a mockumentary called The Confederate States of America that imagines the United States had the rebels won
And the South Wind, yeah.
during the Civil War,
Yeah.
and how the world would look. It's really funny, but there is some, as the great William Shakespeare, great name by the way, as he once said, that most truths are said in jest. And so this mockumentary shows a lot of things about that. But
Is this a recent one? Is this?
I think it was done
last couple
like
years,
in the 90s or early
really?
2000s.
Okay, I
so
haven't
you
seen
can look
it.
it up. It's the
Yeah, we will.
Confederate States of America. And I thought it was always like really interesting to see all this stuff starting to manifest itself now. So, it's when they say keep politics out of sport, you can't. That's always been a part of it, whether you believe that or not. Sorry, Screaming A. Smith, who went on Fox because of the new merger now, that 20th Century Fox brought up Disney. So there's a strange dynamic going on between Fox and ESPN or Disney Sports or whatever you want to call
Yeah,
it.
whatever they're called now.
And Stephen A. Smith is going on other shows on the Fox News Network talking about, how politics should stay out of sports. And no one can talk about politics and sports except him somehow, but whatever. So we'll leave that all that alone. I'm just really I'm engaged with this season of the NBA, even though people are like Golden State's gonna win out. I think that there's more drama in the summer than it was in the finals, and I think this drama at least during the regular season keeps people engaged during these dog days of the NBA before we get to the NBA All-Star break in February.
Well, and if you look at, and we'll stick with the East here, where obviously the Raptors, depending on how you want to grade that season, the slight philosophical change what they're doing maybe offensively, but everyone's going to talk about Cleveland first. They're going to talk a little LeBron. Well, I don't know if you can really it's. If LeBron went to any other team, doesn't he probably take them at least to, how far does he go? Does he go to a finals or at least win a conference or go to the conference finals? He probably does, because I still think he's probably, in terms of an athletic specimen at the highest level of a sport. I know people are still going to talk about Michael Jordan. I certainly get that argument, but I really haven't seen a whole bunch of anything like I've seen with LeBron James. Like, I'm a fan. I'm a huge fan.
There's not a comparison, despite people's mild to moderately, anally irritated feelings about LeBron surpassing Michael Jordan somehow. I think that when you see a guy in his 15th season of doing this and has gone to the final 7 years in a row and been to the Olympics a couple times in that span, that's a lot of basketball in your body. And at 33, it doesn't sound like an old guy, but he's probably at 38 body-wise. But because of the way he takes care of his body, and the mental part of it is really a big deal and a really big part of it. You've never seen anything like this, and people try to deny it as much as they want to. The cognitive dissonance that goes on with this thing is amazing to me. Like, sometimes you have to appreciate greatness, and you've seen it in your lifetime. You've seen Michael Jordan, and some of the people who cape for Michael Jordan are kids who watch YouTube. They have YouTube nostalgia, as I call it, and they love sneakers.
Yep.
Because if Michael Jordan's sneakers sucked, you wouldn't be talking about him. Nobody talks about Magic sneakers, and I think that Magic Johnson, because I don't rate players who are still playing as the greatest, or like they could be eventually when he's done, but I'm not going to say that right now until his chapters are written. But Magic Johnson is the greatest player who ever lived to me, because he beat and lost to the greatest teams in the history of the NBA during his era. And I'm not talking about in 91 when he lost to the Bulls. I'm talking about in the 80s, where, there were teams that dominated. The Pistons, the Celtics, and the Lakers dominated that decade. And you saw who the top players were. And how many times did Michael Jordan even make the Eastern Conference Finals in the 80s? Once? That's how good the 80s were. And Magic, they say, well, they had a super team. Well, they were playing against super teams in the Pistons and the Celtics.
Well,
so
and a lot of people will say, for instance, that in the Eastern Conference, if you're talking about what LeBron is doing and the domination of the Cavs, they'll say, well, but look at the competition. Basketball is not as good.
That's a lie. Basketball is better because athletically, there are more athletes, there are more players who can play the game at a very high level. And again, the level of competition wasn't watered down by expansion during this time when Michael Jordan was winning. That's a whole nother conversation. I could have a whole show on that. And it's not
I think one day
dismiss.
you're going to have a whole show on
Yeah,
that.
well, I'm not going to dismiss the accomplishments of Michael Jordan. I mean, he won when he could win. And I don't knock that, but these two things can be true in the same space. Where Michael Jordan won all these titles, but it was the weakest period in NBA history because of expansion. This is a better era of basketball. When Michael Jordan played on a 30-win team and made the playoffs, you don't tell me that's a better time. It was 1986, and they made the playoffs with 30 wins. But I'm not here to bash Michael Jordan. I'm looking at what LeBron James has done. You said, here's a guy who you think is going to be – they're going to make the Eastern Conference Finals again. You don't know. I mean, there's a lot of – when people start to wring their hands in January about a team, as they do every January about the Cleveland Cavaliers, then somehow – they make it to the LeBron Raymond James Invitational, the Eastern Conference Finals is what we call it now. Then that talk about January is gone. But in all of that, and to go back to what you were talking about with the Raptors, they have the best record they've ever had at this point. They're 30-13. This is the better team, and it's not just a slight offensive change.
You think it's more than that?
It is a drastic change of culture in the way they went about it. Now, I wrote an article at Press Basketball called it's called My Daddy Tools. It was about Vince Carter coming back and retiring here in the whole nine, getting him on the cheap, and bringing in a guy like C.J. Miles. And this is before this is like in May of last year. So it was before free agency. It was before everything else. And to see how I thought Jerry Stackhouse was going to get a chance to coach his team, like everything like that. Yep. The lineup looked a lot like what I wrote in my article. And they're going to change their philosophy to play the game in a different way. Now they're young guys who they've developed great with the 905. I think they have, outside of maybe Golden State, the best development program in the G League right now. And you see the fruits of that labor coming off in Fred VanVleet. You see it in Jakob Poeltl. You see it in Pascal Siakam. You see it in DeLon Wright. They're even bringing up guys, Lorenzo Brown. Like, they have young guys for that bench to make them one of the top benches in the NBA. And that second unit is going to be key in the playoffs because if they can play
we talked about talking about that today. Absolutely.
They're going to be a problem. The Raptors are not a joke, and I think that, there's always this thing about, America doesn't pay attention. Why do you care? Win games, you'll get paid attention to, and you win games when they count. I'm not saying the regular season doesn't count, but when you get to the playoffs, you can't get swept, you can't get knocked out, and I think that, the year that they went to the Eastern Conference Finals was a little bit of fool's gold. Not disrespect, just it kind of hyped expectations of this team that shouldn't have been there because they were still in the growth period. If it happens this year and they lose, you have a legitimate reason to believe that they either have to look at changing the program or changing who's at the top of the program or doing something different. But this is a year that I think the Raptors can make real noise in the playoffs and become a legitimate contender to anyone in the East.
Do they tinker with that lineup at all? I know you talk about a lot of these younger players. Do they package these younger players to bring in something before the trade deadline?
No, I think you trust your program. I mean, the funny part is Dwayne Casey has the best record of any coach who ever coached the Raptors.
Yep.
Every year they get better, and somehow someone wants to say, they should bring somebody else in. Well, he's done a great job in creating a culture here with Masai Ujiri, because in Masai you must trust, obviously. But I think that they are who they are. They tried that last year and it didn't work out when they brought in Anthony Leon Tucker. You better know him as PJ.
Yep.
And just bringing in guys that were supposed to be LeBron stoppers. And instead of concentrating on what you do well, you're worried about who you're going to play. As a unit, as a team, you have to concentrate on what you do well and just do your job and give yourself the best chance to win. If you're so concerned about the other team that you hadn't even played yet, that's why you're bringing in guys.
Right.
You hadn't even played them. And that happened in the NFL playoffs. You saw that last weekend in Pittsburgh. I'm just saying.
I think that's called foreshadowing.
Yes.
I
Yes.
think that's what it is.
Or segues.
Or well, if
Much
you,
like tricks there for kids.
it's a bigger word. I didn't go to Rice. I'm just a lowly guy. You're watching RobMikeRichards.com on the website or on the dedicated YouTube channel here in the DKI studio with our good friend Will Strickland. Just curious, you look at Kyrie Irving. A lot of people said, for Kyrie, careful what you wish for. When you want to be a number one and you're number one guy, that changes things. I can't help but think what he's done in Boston and some of the games he's played. Can you argue that wasn't a great decision for him personally?
No, I mean, it worked out.
Yeah.
It worked out so far. Again, they have to show it when it counts in the playoffs, but they look good. There's a new energy in Boston. I mean, they've had this as they've been growing their program, much like the Raptors. Now they got an A-list star in Kyrie Irving, and they're going to get Gordon Hayward back at some point. How they integrate him into that lineup is going to be key. But again, that bench of young guys who came from the G League, Terry Rozier, some of the younger guys they imported in, Tice from Germany, like they have a really good young team. I think they're going to make some noise as well. But I'm not going to cast them off as the favorites because last year they won the East too, but that was like window dressing. Okay, we'll let them win the East, but they almost lost in the first round to the Chicago Bulls, and had Rajon Rondo not injured himself, they would have gotten swept by the Bulls, the 8th seed. So, and that team was Al Horford was on that team. Jaylen Brown was on that team. So they had some of those young guys. But, Jason Tatum and having, Al Horford there playing with Kyrie Irving and like some of these other guys and Gordon Hayward coming back, they're going to be a problem in the Eastern Conference playoffs.
I'm curious to see when Hayward does actually come back and what he looks like. His game shape and play, it's two different things.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to ask you, because, whenever we bring you in, you always have something on the go. You're always busy with something. You're tinkering with something. You're inventing something. What's on the table for you in these next couple months here as we eventually get rid of winter slowly?
Just doing a lot of speaking engagements at universities and colleges.
You did that tour of the Big Ten schools, I think, last time we talked.
Yeah, and doing speaking engagements on hip hop and education, leadership, and just life building. A lot of fun stuff like that. Getting ready for Full Court 21 Canada 2018.
Yep. There you go.
We have a new partner now with us, the National Basketball Players Association.
Nice, very nice.
Partners.
That's very big. Yeah,
we're trying to build some other partners. They're going to do some great things with us. We had Jimmy Butler on with us in Montreal for the Montreal stop, and we're trying to get like an NBA player at each one of the stops
per stop.
to talk about what it means to play basketball at that level. Like that's where you first start to learn about the game when you're playing against guys you don't know. And I think Isaiah Thomas brought this up on NBA TV the other day about how the compete level for some of these players is stuck in that's my buddy mode, or that's my friend mode, so I won't go with him as hard. But when you go to the court, and he says, I saw some of these guys who they're playing for money during the season to make sure they get their contracts. But I saw them play harder in summer league and pickup games than I do see them playing in the NBA games, and that's a problem, But I understand some of the root of that because the money's there now. When it wasn't there, and you had to compete for a job. And I actually talked about.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. That is a good point. That is a very good point.
There's a lot of money involved in this. I mean, I went to training camp in '93, and I'm like, I got to hustle because these guys are like, you're trying to take food off of my plate.
No, what camp are we talking about here?
This is San Antonio. I wrote a story about it.
Okay.
Again, because I'm doing press basketball and write my column, The Open Run, it was ode to the free agent, right? So it's just like, what do you do when you're trying to find a job and something you love doing, and how your love becomes your work, but it will never be your work because you love it so much, right? And just talking about that and my experiences in training camps and like how hard it was. And the guy that I was following, it sounds crazy enough, Dennis Keith Rodman.
Oh, yes.
His work ethic.
You know everyone's middle name too. Do you notice that?
As you should.
It is remarkable.
He doesn't know yours.
Yeah.
No,
Mustafa.
Wait,
Mustafa.
No, I thought it was Hassan, but I stopped. All right, what is the first letter of your middle name?
J.
Mine's J too.
And it's the same?
Yeah, no.
And yours is Jay as well?
Is it
Roast
really?
beef.
Yeah,
That's Tommy roast beef over there. Hey! Roast beef. Give it back. Didn't I tell you to take it back? De Niro and Goodfellas. But I love that car. My wife, she loves that car. Anyway, Jason, James.
You're very close on mine.
not close on mine.
Yeah, you're very close on mine because that was in my.
My J is very biblical.
Jacob.
Close. What's the other big J?
Wow.
Jalen.
Yes.
And whose Bible?
You got it.
And whose Bible? It could happen. Jeremiah?
No, you're in the realm. You're in the realm. Mary and
Joseph.
you got it.
Wow.
Okay.
See, I didn't even know that.
There you go.
I ran my biblical studies right here. That was one thing. I used to read the Bible on the stoop of my house when my parents left me at home to watch my brothers and sisters.
Okay, now
I
you're
was
just
afraid.
Now you're just showing.
I was
off.
afraid. No,
now
no.
you're just showing.
I used to
off.
read it because I was afraid. I thought the Bible would save me.
not
I'm
a
like,
bad thing.
nah, it ain't gonna save me.
Okay, we're gonna run short on time. This happens every time he comes in here. We just run out of time, and I hate it.
What is your middle name?
John?
John. Okay.
John.
So I'm gonna remember
Yeah,
Joseph and
there,
John.
there, oh, I know you will. I know you will.
He doesn't forget.
Yeah, because my wife goes, someone looking for Michael John. Oh, yeah. I know. It's
I know
either the
him.
cops or Will.
It's
I'm
gonna
praying
cost
it's Will.
you. It's gonna
Hopefully
it's gonna
it's
cost
Will.
you.
A couple of things because we got football coming up, but Le'Veon Bell. If you're another team, if you're looking at what he probably is going to ask for, do you pay the money?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's the top 3 running back in the NFL.
No, I was gonna say.
I mean,
top.
because of his skills.
I love
you
the
could
guy.
say top 5.
Yeah, I'm paying him.
But I don't
paying
know
him.
why we're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers. They played themselves.
Yeah, they're done.
I am a fan, an unabashed fan of the New England Patriots, mostly because of my guy, the field surgeon, Dr. Thomas Edward Patrick Brady. Just so you know. And they won't overlook a team and go on Twitter and talk about what they're going to do to the team after the team you have
Sure.
to beat to get there. So, there's a lot of that going on with young guys in Jacksonville right now. And Le'Veon Bell in that situation in Pittsburgh has been a problem all season long. The locker room from Ben on down. Like, we can talk about, Todd Haley should be fired. The defense gave up 45 points.
Yeah.
Keith Butler. Can we talk about that? So, again, you talk about Ben Roethlisberger had the greatest, what I like to call, empty calorie video game stats in like a divisional in years.
Yep.
He threw for almost 500 yards, 5 touchdowns, and he lost.
Yeah. Chasing the whole time.
Yeah, well, that's the joke online is that it was a good thing that game was played at Heinz Field because all they did was catch up.
Catch up. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
No. Well done.
But up bump. I won't be here all week. Do not try the veal. So,
because when you look at Bell, 25 years old. When I was reading about that, it's like the guy's only 25 years old. I mean,
Yeah, it is remarkable.
there should be another 4 years of maximum production in your running back at age 25.
you would hope.
Because by 29, 30, you start to lose that step. Maybe the cut isn't as, but he's not that power back that goes through
With
the
the
wall.
patience, yeah, and
He's
also
very-
he can catch out of the backfield. Which
Yes.
gives
And
him
he
another
totally
dynamic.
sure did last
you
week.
can't always find
Nope.
in a running back, a quality running back.
He's
in
the
NFL.
closest thing, and I'm not going to say he is because he
I
was
think
my
I know.
favorite.
I think I know what your name you're going to say.
He was the okay. Well, let me finish the sentence.
Did he play for Detroit?
He's
Yeah.
the closest thing to Barry Sanders in the league right now.
Wow.
Barry Sanders is my Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, in this league that we're watching today, that's the closest thing to Barry Sanders.
Well, I like Todd Gurley. I like Kareem Hunt looked good.
Kareem Hunt, yeah.
in Kansas City. I
Gurley's-
wouldn't compare those guys. You know what I'm
No.
saying? There's some good
I like
running
Todd
backs
Gurley.
in
I
this
do like
league.
Todd Gurley.
Leonard Fournette
Yeah.
is no joke. That's a grown man.
Well, that's a horse. That's
Yeah.
a horse.
Well, SEC football. That's
It's
what
basically
you
the
get.
NFL, right?
That's
Which
what
is a
you
pro
get.
league, yeah.
yeah. So you're gonna get some really good players out there. But I like Le'Veon Bell. I just and I think they should pay him his money and stop franchising him and giving him 1-year deals because I think that's a lack of respect.
I think it is too.
To a player that brings but at the same time, on the flip side of that, as a management person, you guys have to look at this too. His issues off field
right.
with his recreational use
Sure.
of things that we might not deem kosher for a football player.
Yeah.
Although I think that if
Okay,
they're gonna,
Denver.
if you have to deal, but I'm saying if you have to deal with like Percocets and all this other stuff as opposed to weed,
Yeah.
if generates the same kind of feeling and eases those pains, you weigh it a little bit, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
You know?
No.
Okay, so
Good argument.
you talked about New England. By the way, people said, "Well, did you hear about Tom Brady? He's not available. The medical staff." Okay, New England. I'm not listening to that. Are you serious? Do you think Tom Brady's going to play? Gee, I wonder if Tom Brady. I can't hear New England
been on
any
the
more of your
injury list for
stories.
the
I
last
can't.
20 years.
I can't hear that story.
Is that the
every single week? Tom Brady, questionable shoulder.
is that the
That's all you hear.
what's his name? The guy from The Godfather. Is that the Hyman Roth story? He's been dying of the same heart attack for 20 years. So
Somehow he's there.
he'll be there, and I think a lot of that is to kind of take the distraction of, they know that Jacksonville is talking a lot, and people are looking at that stuff, and he's not going to be in the injury report because I think you have to close it off on the Thursday before the game or Friday.
Thursday
one
or
of the-
Friday, yeah.
Yeah.
And
then
so
you report the
So
inactives
do
on
we
Sunday.
do we have numbers, by the way, while Will's here? Well, we can pin him
We could pin
on
him
something.
numbers.
Just
I'll-
because I thought it was
I'll
it
fire one
9.5.
It wasn't. It
I
opened
thought
at
it was
9.
8.5.
So
I
it's
thought
dropped.
it was 8.5.
It did go
So
down.
it's dropped.
Yeah.
It did go down. Let me just quickly look here on sportsinteraction.com, of course, for all your gambling needs. Sports Interaction currently has the New England Patriots 8.5-point favorites.
So I did my numbers too. Just so you know.
Minnesota 3-point favorites. Both of those numbers have dropped because it did open up as Patriots 9.5.
And I get that because of the experience factor, but you cannot dismiss what Jacksonville has done all season.
Yeah, fantastic.
And what they did going into Heinz Field and like punching Pittsburgh in the mouth the way they did. I mean,
Do you know
the
Case
45
Keenum's? Do you know
points?
Case Keenum's middle name?
No, I do not, but I think Case is his middle name.
Well, is that right?
I think so.
He's doing the Dieter Brock, the Ralph Dieter Brock thing.
It could happen.
Do you like? I like what's happened for him. I think it's a good story. I saw him when he played for the Cougars, and I always say it's the same thing. We talked about this a little bit. For quarterbacks, which I think is the toughest position to play in sports, I just think it is the most difficult position to play in all of sport. And sometimes it is the timing of who you played for, where you're drafted, that coaching staff, their philosophy, what your strengths are. So you get pushed around a little bit. You go to a team that wants to do this. They want to run, you throw. You want to throw, they run. It's all that kind of thing, and to stay mentally tough and focused. So when you finally get your chance, and this is where faith comes in a little bit. I know people want to hear that. Sometimes it does. He gets his chance, and look what he's done.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear about, well, he's a third-string quarterback. No, he's not. Clearly, he is not. So I don't want to hear that.
13 or 14-3 team. No, not at all.
No, and I think it's a good story, and I do think they win in Philadelphia.
There's a great story behind he and Nick Foles playing for the Rams, behind Sam Bradford, who got injured in Minnesota.
Yep.
He gives Case Keenum an opportunity to play, and how Nick Foles, who had a great year in Philadelphia, goes to find his money, does a terrible job, comes back somehow, backing up Carson Wentz, who gets injured. And now these two guys are playing an NFC championship game. Amazing story. And I think that
Do you think
Case-
Jeff Fisher's watching that game?
Yeah, he's saying he has something to do with it, of course. And Case Keenum's story is great because that team lost a stud running back and Dalvin Cook early in the season.
Big time.
They had an opportunity. They got rid of your guy, Adrian Peterson. They were like, what are we going to do? Sam Bradford's one of the most, accurate quarterbacks in the league, even though he's not the most mobile quarterback. He gets injured. There's no way this team, as long as people have been talking about the Rams made great strides. This team, the Minnesota Vikings, have done a great job. That defense is ridiculously fast and ridiculously good. Case Keenum is finding his confidence. That running game is solid enough by committee. When you're good in all three phases, you make it tough for a team like and let's not dismiss what Philadelphia can do defensively.
Very good.
It's what's going to
defensive team.
happen offensively for them against that defense is going to be the key in that game. And, I like Minnesota in that game, even though Philadelphia is the 1 seed and home team. But I just think that Minnesota is going to have a little bit more at the end of the game. And obviously I'm picking the Patriots. But I'm not dismissing or disrespecting what Jacksonville could do. I think that they're going to make Blake Bortles do Blake Bortles, and he's going to look like Blake Bortles previous
He's going to look
times.
like Blake Bortles. That's all you have to say.
No,
He
because
will look like Blake Bortles.
Blake Bortles looked good for the most part.
Yep.
Last weekend he did just enough to win the game.
Last week he looked
and
great.
Sometimes that's all you have to do, Trent Dilfer. That's all you have to do is win the game.
Okay, so I keep saying we're running out of time, but this is
sorry.
what happens with Will. No. If we go to Las Vegas, because I want to see a Golden Knights game because I think they're an unbelievable story
I want
too.
to get that jersey.
Like that jersey, yeah.
You want to? Okay.
Just to have
So if we do a remote from Las Vegas, you would go.
Yeah.
Is Vegas a will town? Is Vegas?
Town is a will town.
Oh, is it?
They're gonna fly the flag. We're gonna make it happen.
Yep.
You know, so let's cut the check. Let's make it happen.
Thanks so much for
you,
coming in.
guys.
Yeah, it's never long enough.
Always.
What? Did we just become best friends?
Yep.